Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we are doing a season preview for the team Leviatán for the 2024 VCT. Leviatán was a very interesting team last year. They were one of the teams out of the Latin America region. They had a pretty good roster going into the season. They didn't end up qualifying for any international tournament outside of lock-in. So it looked like they could possibly be a dark horse team to do some damage throughout the season, but unfortunately, they didn't really make much of an impact. At lock-in, they placed 5th to 8th. At Americas, they placed 5th. They made playoffs, but then they lost, and I don't think they won a map during those Americas playoffs. And then they did go to the LCQ, and they got all the way to the grand finals, but unfortunately lost to their rival in Crew Esports. They placed 2nd. Back in 2022, I definitely saw Leviatán as a dark horse candidate to maybe win a tournament. They looked pretty good. They had some good weapons on their team. It just didn't seem like they had a ton of talent, at least not the level of talent that you really need to take an international title. So 2023 happens, and the org decides that they need to make some sweeping changes, and I'm pretty iffy on the changes they've made so far. I don't know if what they've built here is a roster that is going to be cohesive with one another, but we're here to talk about it. So first off, looking at the players who are out. Shy, Takalila, and Noswer, or NRZ, he is now the sub. He has been placed on the bench. Maybe he gets back into the active roster at some point, but it seems like they're pretty set on Comm being the replacement there. Shy being their Sentinel player, Takalila being their main duelist player, so they've replaced that with Comm and Tex, as well as the addition of Comm, who is Noswer's replacement. So what's interesting to me about the changes that they've made is that they don't have a Sentinel player anymore. We'll go through the characters that were played by each of these players last year, but not to say that Shy was like a particularly elite Sentinel player or anything, but he was at least decent. He was a Sentinel Initiator Flex player last year, and he's not overly good, but I feel like if you're going to take that kind of player away, you're going to have to replace him with somebody that can fill those roles, and I don't know if they've done that. Comm and Tex are both duelist players. None of those players really play Sentinel. Comm, he can, I guess, but he mainly plays Initiator, and I think that's where he's best. In terms of championships won by this organization, that's a big old 0. They do have some players that have won international tournaments on their roster now, so hopefully that adds a bit of experience to them and is able to push them through adversity. Choosing their 2023 MVP, it is an interesting conversation to have, but I think Kane, he is their IGL, and he performed pretty well. I do like his numbers and just what he is able to do on the battlefield, so I do expect Kane to continue to be a very good IGL for this team going forward. So looking at the 2023 stats for all of these players, first off, we are starting with their smokes player in Mazzino. He had 678 kills, 699 deaths, 378 assists for a KD ratio of 0.96. He played Astra, Omen, Brimstone, and Harbor, so all the smokes characters. Interesting that he didn't play Viper, but that was a role filled by King when needed, so they are able to do double smokes, and with the players that they've added, they might be able to do that more, but there is some concern that I have. What's also interesting about Leviatán and their rival Crew is that this team seems to swap players a lot. I don't know if it's just because they're the only two Latin America teams in the VCT Americas. I guess they don't have a ton of crossover with the Brazilian teams. Mazzino, he's been on Crew. Takalila, he's now on Crew. They had Kesnet for a bit. He's back on Crew. He went from Crew to Leviatán to back to Crew. So a lot of swapping between these teams for some reason, but I guess, again, that's probably because they're the only two big Latin America teams in the VCT. Moving on to King, the IGL, he had 763 kills, 626 deaths, 372 assists for a KD ratio of 1.21. Very solid numbers for an IGL. He mainly played Initiator with KO and Breach, but he was also able to fill in for the double smokes role and play Viper. Kane, very good player, very solid numbers there. Better kill-death ratio than a lot of other IGLs out there, so he definitely has some value when it comes to that. Aspas, he's the big one. He's the big free agent that every other team was looking to get. Everyone wanted this player. Energy was in the mix. His former team Lad was in the mix, but Leviatán seemed to always be the front runner. In 2023, he had probably some of the best stats of any player. He had 1,402 kills, 1,076 deaths, 275 assists for a KD ratio of 1.30. You would notice that his assists are kind of low, but that's because he finishes nearly every kill that he gets. He played Jet and he played Raze, and this is kind of where my concern comes in. I think picking up Aspas, fantastic choice. He's a really good player. He's probably top 3 in the world. He's absolutely one of the best tools out there that you can get. So swapping out Takalila for Aspas, I think that's a great decision. No shade to Taco. He's a great player too. He will do well on crew, I'm sure of it. But Aspas definitely is a lot better in that department. But I think what they've done is a bit of an overcorrection. Not in the Aspas sign. I think if you just throw Aspas and swap him and Takalila into last year's roster, you have a very good roster that absolutely could win Americas. But you also pick up Tex, who I'll get to a bit later. I'm going to get to Comm first. But now you have 2 duelist players, and it's going to be interesting how they manage that. Moving on to their most recent pickup in Comm, he had 1,087 kills, 1,069 deaths, 581 assists for a KD ratio of 1.01. During the season, he played Fade, KO, Sova, Breach, and Viper. So a mainly initiator player, swapping out Nosword. That was his main role as well. So he can play that, and he can help out on smokes too with a bit of Viper play. So maybe we'll see King transition to mainly initiator, or we'll see a bit more flexibility between those 2 players, because they're going to have to figure out how they navigate their own roles. Comm, I do think, is a solid pickup. I do think he might be a bit overrated at this point. When he was on Evil Geniuses, it seemed like early in the season he was seen as just a really good role player, a really solid role player. Like, not anyone that you look at as like super high talent, like super good player. But then Champions happened, and then all of a sudden he's just a clutch god, and he is, one of the main reasons why Evil Geniuses won that tournament. He was just insane that entire tournament. But before that, he was just another good player on the team. He wasn't, at least I didn't see him as elite. So swapping out Nosware for Comm, I think it can work out. I think Comm definitely can, be better than Nosware, especially, he's already done better. But is he going to fit on this new roster? Him and the Evil Geniuses roster, they all had very good chemistry. They were able to swap roles a lot. They were able to do different things. They had great chemistry, great IGLing, great fragging. Like, they were good at pretty much everything when it comes to Valorant, and Comm was a big part of that. Can he repeat that on a different team? Now that roster is completely broke out, we're probably going to see a couple of those players that left not do very well. You have Demon 1 and Ethan on Energy, you have Comm here, you have Boostia 100 Thieves. I don't expect all of those players to have the same season that they did last year. And unfortunately, Comm looks like that he might be the main candidate for that. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope I'm wrong on that. But this roster is just much more concerning than the Evil Geniuses one. Now we move on to Tex, who I think is the biggest head scratcher when it comes to why did they pick this guy up. Tex is a good player. When he was on the guard last year in Tier 2, he had 1,013 kills, 845 deaths, 217 assists for a KD ratio of 1.19. He played Jet, Raze, Chamber, and Sage. So out of these 4 characters that he played with the guard, you have Jet and Chamber being the main operator characters, and then you have Raze, who's another good duelist that Tex is able to hop on. You have a little bit of Sage. He didn't play that much Sage, but I guess he's able to. I don't really see him as a Sentinel player, though. So my main concern with it is you're just going to run double duelist comps. I mean, that's what they've been doing in the offseason. So far, it's been working for them. But apparently there was internal struggle, and, players weren't happy. Aspas reportedly is not the happiest, especially after dropping Nosware. So you have Aspas, who had the pick of the litter when it came to which team he chose to be on. He chooses this team, and all of a sudden internally it's not going very well, especially because we had Nosware dropped it this late in the offseason. So they sign a lot of talent, they sign a lot of players that, looking at these stats, most of them are pretty good. Like, they can absolutely frag out, but is it going to work as a cohesive unit? Will it all mesh together? Honestly, right now, this roster is reminding me of the 2023 Sentinels. They sign a bunch of talent, they do this basically a full rebuild. They kept 2 players. I think Sentinels only kept 10s, but they do this rebuild. They bring in world champions, and it just doesn't look like it's really going to mesh together. It seems like this org definitely has high expectations for this roster, especially with probably the amount of money they put behind it and just the sheer talent and pedigree that these players come with. But all that talent can go away when it doesn't work well chemistry-wise. And Sentinels as well was a mixed language team. You had players that spoke English, and you have the Portuguese players from Loud. So they could run into the same problem. It's not impossible to have a mixed language roster. We have seen it work before, and Sentinels seem like they've probably figured out that part. They're probably going to be communicating in English on their comms. Aspas, I'm sure he knows English. I don't currently know his level of English, but mainly speaking Portuguese, that's probably going to be a problem. And even if you work really hard to learn a language, even if you start learning it for a couple of years, when you're in a high stress environment, when you're in a competitive environment, there's a bunch of things just being thrown at you. It's a high stress situation. It can be tough to keep up when it's not your native language. So if you go with English as your main language of communication, you're probably going to have at least 3 players on your roster at least have a little bit of trouble with that. I don't know the English level for Kane and Mazzino. Maybe they're fluent with it. I don't know a lot about them, admittedly, but I do see this roster just potentially having a lot of chemistry issues despite their talent. In the offseason, as I said, they've been running double duelist, and that's a comp that we don't really see in pro play a lot, and I don't think it's a comp that right now is super meta. It's one that maybe could work if they just try to outkill their problems. That might be what they have to do, but it is just concerning that they don't really have a main sentinel guy, and it's going to be tough to, stay above waters when you don't really have that role figured out. So we'll see how all that goes, but now we're going to talk about this team's maps from last year. Looking at their best maps, their best map was easily Pearl. They had a 9-1 record on it. Their attack win percentage was 59%, and their defense win percentage was the same. For their second best map, I put down Split. They had a 4-3 record. Their attack win percentage was 52. Their defense win percentage was 51. I could have put Icebox as well, but they only played that map 3 times. They did have a winning record on it, but Split, I felt like it's probably better to highlight a map that they play more often. So Pearl being their best map, that map isn't in rotation right now, so that's gone for them. Split, they have decent numbers on, but they're going to have to figure it out well. Icebox, as I said, they were also decent on, but now that there's changes to that map, they're probably going to be playing that map a lot more often, so they're going to have to figure out a way to be consistently dominant on that map. And looking at their worst maps, there's some concerns I see here. So on Ascent, they were 1-8 last year with that attack win percentage of 35% and a defense win percentage of 45. Lotus was nearly as bad as them. They had a 2-5 record, 54% on attack, and defense was 39. So really bad numbers on both those maps. Both those maps are still in rotation. Lotus has had changes now. They really have to figure out Ascent, and King's going to have to find a way, as well as with their coaching staff, they're going to have to find a way to work that map, because there are some teams that are at the top of the world, especially in Americas. There are some teams that are very good on Ascent. So that's going to be a troubled map if they can figure that out. So overall, looking at this roster, there's a lot of talent here. As I said, there's a lot of good things here, but there is concerns when it comes to the roster construction. I think the Aspas signing makes absolutely a lot of sense. The Comm signing, definitely a good choice as well. The Tex one, he's a good player, but is it really a good idea to have 2 players that are just very good at duelist? Do you need a player that can fit that sentinel role? Can Tex do that? Can Comm maybe come in and do that? And then Kane can just be, one initiator? Do they want to play double initiator? There's just a lot of questions when it comes to the kind of compositions that this team is able to do, because I don't know if these players are flexible enough for that to happen. Overall, I do want this team to do well. I want both Latin American teams to be very talented and very good this year. I think there is potential with them, as well as Crew. We'll get to Crew in a different video, but I think this is going to be a very interesting year for Leviatán, because it could either go really well or it could just crash and burn, and I really hope it doesn't crash and burn. It would just be a shame to not see the likes of Aspas, Comm, Tex, and even Kane and Mazzino, to see them not make an international tournament. That would definitely be tragic, and from an organizational perspective, that would be a huge failure. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Click like if you enjoyed the video. Do you think Leviatán is going to be a dominant force within the VCT Americas this year? Are they going to make Madrid? Are they going to be able to qualify for Masters? Are they going to make champions? Will they finally be able to beat Crew in a big match? We will see. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you all for watching this video. See you guys in the next one. Bye.